Sorry, I forgot to do that a minute ago.
Anyway, her next YA novel is exciting. Maya is forthcoming in August 2022. So that is Jennifer. She's going to say a few words and share a little bit about her work. Yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry, I did want to introduce, we have Dee Riviera, who is a junior here, and Mary Namath, who is a music teacher, and they have worked with Jenn to kind of collaborate on some questions, and they're going to have a great discussion in just a second. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much, Amy, for that warm welcome. I am thrilled to be here in real life, in person. You're 3D, and I don't have to ask you to mute or share your screen. You're here. I see you. Like magic. So again, I'm so grateful to be here. I grew up in MetroWest, and so when Amy emailed me last spring and invited me to be the author for the MetroWest Readers Fest, I was ecstatic. I really was honored. This is where I grew up. This is where I first started writing in my diary and my journal. And for years and years, I always wanted to be an author, but I didn't know how. I'll get to that in a little while, but when Amy contacted me, I was so honored, and it's been a joy to work with you and plan for these events this week. And it's also great to have met Nina. Teachers and librarians, students, like you're my people, so I'm happy. I also want to acknowledge that my mom is in the audience. There you go. She is wearing pink to match the book, of course. And so I actually dedicated the book to her. I write at the beginning, for my mother, for believing, because she always believed in me and my work and my writing. So who am I? Some of you might know me a little bit, but some of you might be watching from home, like, who is this woman? I am Jenn de Leon, and I, like I said, grew up in Framingham. I went to college not very far away, but then I traveled the world and came back and lived 10 minutes from my childhood home. So in that way, I guess I'm a classic middle child. I grew up elbowing my way through rules and obstacles and landed right close to my parents. And I love it because they, we see them all the time. I also want to share that I was an educator. I worked in Boston Public Schools for over 10 years. I did the Teach for America program in California, and now I am a professor of creative writing at Framingham State University, which is a great university. And if you want to study creative writing, come there and work with me. All the while, I should mention that I am working on books and writing, and for me, there's such synergy between being a teacher and a writer and a daughter and a wife and a mother and all of these things. Growing up, I often felt divided, like I lived in two worlds. What do I mean by that? During the week, I had, most of my friends were white, most of my teachers were white, coaches, everyone. And that was the world that I knew. And on the weekends, my family and I would get in the station wagon or the caravan and drive down Route 9 to Jamaica Plain, which is where my grandmother lived and my aunts and uncles, my tias, my tios. We would cram into tiny apartments, and we would have food and music and laughter. Somebody was always passing around a baby. And my cousins would call me white girl. They would call me gringa. Or they'd say, why are you always reading a book? You get so much homework. And I would say, it's not homework. I love to read. And so what happened is I didn't really feel like I belonged in Boston with my cousins. I didn't feel Latina enough. And then at home during the week, I felt too Latina. A lot of my friends, my white friends, would say, why are your parents so strict? Why can't you babysit? I mean, why can't you sleep over? Why can't you have a boyfriend? Right? All these things. And I had to explain to them that culturally, we just weren't allowed to do these things. And so I learned to code switch from a very young age. And I became pretty good at it. I could switch back and forth, back and forth. And when I got to college, it kind of was more intense. I would get questions from other students and even professors, like, Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you really from? What are you? What tribe are you in? You're in the international dorm, right? Wait, where's the financial aid office? You know, right? Can you help me with my Spanish homework? It's due in an hour. And so I was on the receiving end of a lot of these questions. And the thing is, asking someone where they're from is not a bad question. I don't think it is. It's the way in which it's asked, right? Is it otherizing? Are you in a dialogue and trying to have a conversation with someone? It really depends. And I always felt kind of like somebody was announcing that I didn't belong there. Well, luckily I am my mother's daughter and I persisted and I eventually really loved my college. I made the best friends of my life in college. And I will be honest that I had my assumptions too. I went to college thinking that whiteness was a monolith, to be perfectly honest. I thought that all my friends had it easy, that their parents just wrote checks for their tuition and their books. But I learned, of course, that that wasn't the case. And so one place that I could really ask questions and make meaning out of a lot of the different experiences I was having was my journal. It was the page. And I feel most at home when I have a pen in my hand, when I'm writing in my journal. Now I do write on the laptop, but it was the late 90s. So I had journals and I filled them and wrote in them because the paper never talked back to me. It always was a space where I could go. And I didn't have many role models in terms of other authors. I didn't read my first Latina author until I was a freshman in college, when I read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And I will never forget the moment that I read that book. I know the chair I was sitting in at the library on campus. It was a very comfortable chair, big. And I remember seeing words in Spanish and kind of freaking out. Like, wait, you can do that? You could write in English and Spanish? And I would read the characters and think, that's like my tia, that's like my mother. And that shock of recognition was so powerful. And it inspired me to keep at my goal of becoming a writer. It would take me a long time, but eventually I wrote a novel, Don't Ask Me Where I'm From. And if you aren't familiar with it, it tells the story of 15-year-old Liliana Cruz, who is struggling to fit in at her new school, which is a PWI, a predominantly white institution. And her father is missing. She realizes early on that he's actually not missing. He's been deported. And I have to say, when I do school visits, sometimes people know what deported means and sometimes they don't. So I always from now on want to share just in case. When you're deported, it means that you don't have the legal papers to be in the United States. And so ICE can, or the US government can basically ask to see your papers. And if you don't have the right documentation, you can be deported, which means processed, put on an airplane and sent back to the country where you were born. And this can be very, very traumatic. Imagine you're suddenly living your life, working, and then boom, you're deported, and your kids might not know you don't. It's not like you don't get a phone call, you don't get to go home and pack, none of that stuff, right? Oh, my favorite sweater. No, you're taken, that's it. And for a lot of students, former students of mine, they had that experience. Both of my parents were US citizens before I was born. So I didn't have that specific experience like Liliana, but like I said, many of my students did, and some family members. So I wrote this book for my younger self. I wrote this book for you. I wrote this book for you. I wrote this book for all of you taking the time out of your life right now to listen, which I really appreciate. This is the book I wish I had. And this is a book that I wanted to pass to my students, Latina and otherwise. Toni Morrison has this amazing quote where she says, if there is a book in the world that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you need to be the one to write it. And I remember hearing that quote and thinking, oh man, now I have to do it. Now I have to do the thing, write the book. And I'm so glad that I did. There's a lot more I could say, but I'll just finish by reading a scene to you from the beginning of the book. Liliana is, as I said, struggling to fit in. Her father's been deported to Guatemala. She has no idea what's going on. Meanwhile, she's got best friend drama, boy drama, little brother drama. But here she is. She's upset at her mom because she got into a program called METCO, which is a real program. It's the oldest desegregation program in the United States. Students of color in Boston are bused from the city to neighboring white suburbs to get a better education. So Liliana is like, what? Why do I have to do METCO? And her mother is like, you're doing it. And so she's reflecting on the first time that her father actually tried to sign her up to go to, again, a better school. So this is a flashback. Liliana is reflecting. As I thought about it, it started making sense. See, every February when I was in elementary school, my dad had dragged me to a charter school lottery. The last time we went, I think I was 10. I remember because Dad got us a blue raspberry culotta from Dunkin's, even though it was snowing. The school basement was packed. I even recognized a girl from my grade. She was with her grandmother, who clutched a rosary as she prayed. I was kind of scared at first, but Dad explained that we were there to put in our application for a spot at the charter school. I didn't know what a charter school was, and to be honest, I still don't really understand how it's different, besides the fact that they make you go to school longer, sometimes even in the summer. But Dad was all psyched about it. Like the other parents, Dad filled out a form and received a poker chip with a number on it. Then we sat and waited on benches for like ever, passing the culotta back and forth until finally a lady at the front of the room said it was time to start the lottery. Inside one of those big round bingo pages were poker chips that matched the ones that had been handed out. The cage was packed with chips. Let me tell you how this is going to work, the lady announced. I'm going to call the numbers, and if your number is called, your child gets a spot. At the end, we'll put the rest of the names on the waiting list. How many spots are there? A man with red cheeks asked. 28. How many poker chips have you given out? 212. The audience gasped. I looked at Dad, who rubbed at his knuckles. No lie, I was ready to be done with it. My butt hurt from sitting so long, and I had to pee. As the lady called the numbers and the spots filled up, some parents cried tears of joy. The sleeping babies woke up in a daze. The old people clapped. But as we got to the 23rd and 24th slots, other families, most families, began to weep into crumpled tissues. This must be one special school, I remember thinking. And when she called the number for the 28th slot, a man screamed, "Así es!" Around us, the weeping grew louder. The lady at the front looked around. I gotta admit, she looked really sad and said, "Thank you all for coming. If your number hasn't been called, you'll be added to the waiting list." Dad's nostrils opened and closed like a bull's in a bullfight. In a low, calm voice, he said, "Let's go." I grasped his hand, glad we were leaving, but he was heading for the lady. "Thank you for organizing this lottery," he said to her, dipping his head. "I know you have lots of kids on the waiting list. My daughter Liliana would love to attend this school. Is there something I could do? Work as a janitor at night or on the weekends, or maybe..." "Sir, please," she interrupted. "There is a waiting list, as I explained. Fair is fair. But I want her to have a chance. I couldn't finish school. Please hear me out." The woman looked at my culotta blue lips. "I'm sorry, sir, you have to go." She pointed to the door where families were inching their way out of the hot basement. I thought maybe Dad was going to jump over the table and tell this lady off, but he didn't. He nodded. "Thank you anyway," he said, so politely, and we walked away. "Dad, can't you talk to her boss or something?" He shook his head. "Dad, why can't I go to this school? That's not fair." "Life isn't always fair, mija," he said. "But Dad, listen to me. This is not a problem. Oye, there are worse things in life. At least you have a public school you can go to. I didn't even have that." He looked up. Outside, the snow had almost covered the basement windows. "Dad, you want something, Liliana? You go after it, no matter what. You'll get an education, whether it's at a charter school or not, okay? Dad, you have a goal, stick with it. ¿Entiendes?" I nodded. "But Dad, what is it? I really have to pee." I'll end there. So there's a little bit of Liliana for you. So I'm excited for this conversation, and I hope everyone in the audience can think of questions for the end of tonight as well.
So we'll start off with the first question. So Don't Ask Me Where I'm From is your first debut novel. What in general inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, we passed it back. Yeah. What inspired me to write this book? As I mentioned, this is the book I really yearned for when I was growing up. I just wanted to read a book where the character was going through similar struggles that I was. It was really that simple. But what inspired me to actually write it, I would say that around 2015, 2016, I was feeling like a sort of way. I needed to get the story out. And I saw that lots was happening in the world, and I just felt like I need to do it. I need to do it now. And I tried to, like a protagonist, like a hero in a story, rise to the call for action. And I knew that if I didn't write it, I would be so mad at myself, and I just felt like life is too short, and we need to do the things that we're scared of.
Jen, I personally loved how you personalize Liliana's story. So we read the news about immigration and issues with ICE, and even the last month or two, immigration issues, migrants, it's all over the news. But Liliana's story is so beautiful and just puts you right in that family. All the worries, and she's trying to get really good grades in school, and then all this stuff. Where is her father? It was so wonderful. I loved reading the story. Why did you decide to focus on asking where I'm from on the METCO program? And what is your personal opinion of it? Do you think it's still relevant today? Do you think it's outdated? What are your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, METCO, as I mentioned, is the oldest desegregation program in the country. It's been around over 50 years, and it's currently in 33 districts. And when I was growing up, it was in Framingham Public Schools, which is where I went to school. It's no longer in Framingham, but I wanted to set Liliana figuratively, metaphorically, and physically in a setting where she was having to code switch, where she was having to make all these smaller decisions about how to talk, how to act, how to dress. And the METCO program sort of checked all those boxes. METCO itself, I think, is a fascinating program. I was able to do a lot of research on the program. When I was researching the novel, I met with METCO students. I read Susan Eaton's amazing book on METCO, and I talked to some family members who are in METCO, and I tried my very hardest to breathe life into Liliana's experience and make it authentic. And I did have some beta readers as well. But basically, I wish there wasn't a need for METCO, right? I wish that communities were diverse on their own, that we didn't need to put kids on buses at 5 a.m. to come to neighboring schools. I wish that no matter what your latitude and longitude, that you can go to a school that makes you thrive, not just survive, right? And that allows you to pursue your interests and grow academically, emotionally, spiritually. What parent doesn't want that for their child? But METCO does serve a purpose, and a lot of times people think METCO only serves students of color, but it's not true. It serves everyone, because it helps to diversify a lot of these white communities that would otherwise have very little to no diversity. And the reality is, when students graduate high school and they go to college and graduate school and beyond, especially in the workplace, they are going to be in diverse spaces and places. and they're going to need to know how to be. And it's also a deficit, I think, if we don't have diversity in a community. So those are all the reasons why I chose to write about MECO. And I do love the program, and I love MECO students, and I work a lot with the organization.
So, obviously, international where I'm from, there's a big variety of different characters, whether it's Liana's family, her friends from her town, or her friends or non-friends from her new school. Are any of these characters inspired by people you know in real life?
Ooh, I'm in the hot seat. What if I name them now? No. I would say not exactly. The characters are kind of composites of different people I've known, sure, over the years, but I can't point to any one character and say like, oh, that was my best friend or not, or I knew that guy. You know, they're kind of just, it's fiction, you know, in that way. And Liliana, I do share a lot in common with her, but she's also completely made up. So it's not a memoir, it's a novel in that way.
All right, you said that you taught in Boston Public for 10 years.
10 years.
Amazing. What grades did you teach, for how long? And did you encounter any issues related to discrimination, racism, or immigration, similar to what is portrayed in Don't Ask Me Where I'm From?
Yes, great question. I did teach in Boston Public Schools. I taught 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, English language arts, sometimes ESL, creative writing, and I love being a teacher. I always say this, but it's true that I don't have to teach, I get to teach. For me, it's very integral to my work as a writer as well, as a creative person. But I would say that what I experienced in teaching in Boston and also in California, students have so much that they're carrying to school. And it's not just in their backpacks, you know, I mean, there would be times where students would be stressed because of parents had recently been deported, or they wanted to go on this field trip, but they, you know, they couldn't afford the price, or they really loved this particular subject, but they, you know, they maybe didn't have a computer at home or whatever it is. And I don't mean to paint it in a way that all students in Boston are one way, not at all. But what does stick with me is the fact that everyone had these stories, and it was just so, it was beautiful, and it was joyous, but sometimes it was also painful, you know. And I think that when students don't see their experiences reflected in literature, they kind of feel invisible. Like, oh, that's not normal, or my experience, I should be ashamed of it. I'm just gonna stay quiet about it. I'm not gonna talk about it. And they internalize a lot of those emotions. And I think, what if they could see themselves in fiction or nonfiction? They might feel seen and validated and like, oh my goodness, someone else is going through this too. And for readers who don't have parents who are maybe deported or aren't familiar with these experiences, then the literature could be a window for them, where it's mirrors for other people.
So, Don't Ask Me Where I'm From was your debut novel in 2020. How long did it take you to write it? And did the political climate at the time that you wrote this book influence it in any way? And as a child of Guatemalan immigrants, where do you stand on how America is currently handling immigration?
I love these questions, and I love that you're a junior in high school asking these questions. It's just like, so amazing. Because, you know, you're thinking critically, you're not passively receiving education. And even the word history, right? Think about it, break it apart. His story, it's a story, and it's one perspective. And I think that part of what stories do, again, fiction and nonfiction, is to breathe more life into the version of history that we've been on the receiving end of. In 2016, I was devastated. I felt like, wait a minute, in the news and in the media, I'm seeing images and videos and all of this rhetoric about specifically Central American migrants fleeing poverty and danger and in their homes. And instead of being received like refugees or people who are seeking asylum, they were tear gas was spread on them, right? They were blockaded from the border. They were maybe processed and immediately deported, right, without having their cases heard. And it made me feel like the least I could do is write a story. The least I could do is try to share a different perspective. Everyone is welcome to their viewpoints. Of course, we're in the United States. I will say that for me, one of the greatest privileges of my life is to be able to engage and interact with people from different backgrounds and different viewpoints. And my take on the way the US government is approaching immigration now, specifically from Central America, and the way it has been, is deeply connected to the 1950s and 1960s in Guatemala, with the role that the United States and the CIA played in the Civil War in Guatemala. And this is where history really comes into play. And I'll tell you, as a junior in high school, I didn't know this. I didn't know, and I had been to Guatemala several times with my family, but I didn't know about the deep, rich history until I learned about that in my 20s, that I started to connect the dots. And even now, I'm older than my 20s, but I feel like, wait a minute, things are connected. These migrants who are showing up at the border today, if you follow the thread, it's connected to the Civil War in the 50s and the 60s and the damage that that war caused. And so there are no jobs, education is a mess, the infrastructure is poor, there are very few opportunities. So of course, after generations of struggling, you're going to want to seek more. It's what my parents did. And I think, what if my parents had reached the border and they had been told, do not come? I'm glad that they didn't receive that message. And I also am glad that they came to the United States. I know that my life would be different. I'm not saying it would be better there or better here, but I know that my positionality here in the United States, I feel like so charged up about sharing stories, the many different stories of what it means to be Guatemalan and Guatemalan American. Woo, I get worked up.
And don't ask me where I'm from. Lily and the other met the Students Lead a School Assembly with the intent of raising awareness and increasing cultural literacy. The meeting goes south quickly. Do you have any advice for how to engage the entire school body, faculty and students, in conversations related to race, inclusion, and equity?
I do. I have so many ideas, and I love that this is a question, because it shows like that. I really want us to talk to each other, and share, because teachers and students, and this is what it's all about. I wrote this book for many reasons, but one main reason is to spark dialogue and conversations. And I would love to see more assemblies where we're talking about race and equity issues. And I think a lot of times people are scared to do that because it's like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or what if I offend someone, or what if somebody doesn't like what I say, and then, they unfollow me on Instagram, or worse, like they call me a name, and that's damaging, right? There's so many things that could happen, but that's just letting us be ruled by fear, right? And I think that we can do it in a respectful way. And one way is that if people share their individual stories, I mean, you can't really tell someone their story is wrong, right? And it's not about right or wrong. It's about sharing your experience. And maybe that will allow other people to see other sides to maybe the dominant narrative that they're seeing in the media. So I am a big storytelling fan, if you couldn't tell, and I think that a basic assembly could be, what if you had 10 students share their individual stories? and the audience just sort of listens, and then maybe people are inspired to go up to the microphone and share their stories, right? And it can be messy, it can be clunky. People might get uncomfortable, and that is okay. I would rather we try and have a conversation that's productive than to not try out of fear about saying the wrong thing.
Okay, so in your story, Liana is asked to write a 6-word autobiography in creative writing class, and obviously you shared some about your life throughout this whole thing. What would your 6-word autobiography be?
At first, I thought it was "Don't ask me where I'm from," right? That was always the 6-word autobiography that I gave during those icebreakers. But Liliana took it, so I can't use it. But truthfully, I would choose, "Please ask me where I'm from." And I would love to share where I'm from, where my parents are from, where my ancestors are from. Because the thing is, everyone is from somewhere. And we all have histories, her stories, lots of stories to share. And I just feel like, what a beautiful thing to be able to do that with one another. And pivoting from that, I want to hear your stories. You know, I want to know what it's like being a student here at Ashland High School. I want to know what it's like being a teacher here, and what draws you to this work and these conversations, and maybe even what you might say to other students or to other adults who are like, "Oh, I'm not sure, we don't want to go there. School is for learning algebra," or something, you know?
Those are great questions. Dee, do you wanna be the first to respond?
So, spot here.
I know, sorry, you don't have to answer it.
So I guess I'll start off with like sharing my story. So I'm a junior here at Ashland, and I have lived in Ashland and went to Ashland Public Schools my whole life. And throughout going to public schools, I've experienced a lot of feeling sort of left out, essentially. So obviously, things are still being more integrated into school, talking about diversity and differences and everything. But growing up as a child, I've always felt somewhat embarrassed of my heritage, embarrassed that, oh, you know, my grandparents can't speak very good English. I have to go out with them and I have to translate for them, or trying to help relatives and other people figure out what things mean in English. I almost felt like I needed to put on like a mask around, you know, my friends in school, and then change them with my family. Because like you said, you've experienced being called gringa, and, you know, being told that, oh, you don't speak enough Spanish, or you don't experience enough culture to be part of the like the very like dominantly Hispanic family. Or well, on the opposite, in school, it's just like, what do you mean, like, you eat rice and beans for dinner almost every day? Like, you don't switch it up, you guys don't go to fancy restaurants? Or going to school and being on the free lunch plan, seeing all these people being like, yep, my mother packed me lunch in the morning, she got up early, she made these cute little sandwiches, she cut out fruit for me. It's like, I never experienced what a lot of white students experience growing up and going to public school and experiencing all these different things. And so there was a divide almost. And there had been points in my life where I was trying to fit in, I was trying to dress a certain way, I was trying to act a certain way, I was trying to show off, being like, oh yeah, you know, like, my parents bought me this, I'm, you know, trying to force myself to fit in almost in this way that I was neglecting my heritage. So I think now that I've been in high school and I've met a lot of different teachers that are very interested in talking about diversity, talking about how, it's okay to express this diversity. And it has been a really wholesome experience in Ashland High School, mostly talking with other students and teachers about this, being in clubs like the CARES Club that we have here, which talks about all these different problems with racial injustice and a bunch of different things, and being able to openly talk about and express different stories.
Wow. I want to hear from you, but oh my God, that was incredible. And talk about, like, that was you on the spot. Wow, imagine if you had like a whole thing prepared. That's the power of story. You shared your story authentically, I could feel it, I had goosebumps. And I feel like we're gonna be here at your book signing, and I'm gonna be in line, and I'm gonna be like, please sign my book. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Okay.
Oh my goodness, how to follow that. I teach music here at Ashland High School, and while I have always had a passion for social justice, growing up in very white suburb of Ohio, I went to a more diverse college, and then I took a 2-year teaching contract in the Middle East in 2006 through 2008, which was a really powerful experience. It was the first time that I had ever been a minority, and that like I felt the weight of it, like almost every minute of every day, and that really opened my eyes so much to how friends and peers and colleagues must feel. So it wasn't until the protests in spring of 2020 that I really started to get active. I was so upset by the killing of George Floyd, and I figured I have to be more a part of the conversation, and I have to be doing more instead of expecting other people to change what I didn't like seeing on the news and in person. I had to do my part to bring about change. It wasn't happening in my house with my sweet husband as I got all fiery talking about whatever was on the news. So after that, a couple of teachers and I put together this CARES group, which is Clockers for Anti-Racism, Equity, and Social Justice. And a big part of our mission is educating ourselves so that we can help educate our community. And I struggled because as a white Christian cisgender woman, I only have my own story, and I know that there is so much to learn. So I am very passionate about learning and helping to try and bring other people into the fold and to help people feel more comfortable that we can talk about race and oppression and inequities in a constructive way. It doesn't have to be a throw down fight, that we can have conversations together, and white people need to be a part of the conversation on racism.
Wow, I love this so much. It's so great. I feel like I want to hear from you all in the audience too, but wow, I'm really lifted up by both of your stories, and I'm proud to be at this table with you both. Comments or questions from those in the audience could be about anything.
Has a question. We have a mic up here that people can ask at, or I can say from your seat as well. I actually have a question that I'm going to start with, if you don't mind. You, in both your books, you talk about sort of role models, Sandra Cisneros. Can you talk a little bit about that and how seeing someone do something that you wanted to do and now have, someone who was maybe had a background similar to you, and the influence that had?
Yes, if you didn't hear the question, it's basically talking, can I talk a little bit about the importance of role models in my life, and then the importance of having role models for young people as they're trying to figure out, what they want to do in the world. And for me, as I mentioned, I always wanted to be a writer, like since 2nd grade. can ask my mom, you know, so like I was always just writing, like, give me more paper, give me more paper. And as I got older, for Christmas and holidays, I just always wanted a new journal, like from Barnes and Noble or something. Like, that was my like thing, writing. And as much as I believed in myself and my work and my dreams, I had no roadmap. I didn't actually know how to do it. For me, it would take a long time. And so part of my charge, I guess, is to help speed up that path for other young aspiring writers, again, Latina or otherwise. Because I think part of being an author for me is demystifying what it means to be an author, what it looks like to be an author, and what your day-to-day might be like. If I had had a speaker come into my school, or if I had had a mentor or met with someone who was writing, I would have felt so empowered, like, wait, maybe I can actually do this. I'm pretty stubborn, so I persisted, and I feel like I found my way eventually, but there were a lot of bruises and a lot of setbacks. And yes, some, you know, bumps in the road, you can turn those into stepping stones, but I feel strongly about the fact that we need more diverse books, we need more diverse voices in literature, and we need more people at every stage of the publishing sphere that are from a range of backgrounds. So lots more to say about that, but that's my answer. The Sandra Cisneros, when I finally met her, I freaked out. I called my mom. I was in San Antonio, Texas for a workshop with her. And she walked into the room and she was wearing this flowy white linen dress. She had these Birkenstock sandals that were silver. And I remember her toe polish color was the color of Irish Spring soap. I will never forget it. I stopped breathing and I just stared at her. And then afterwards I went back to my room. I called my mom. I'm like, I just met Sandra Cisneros, you know, and it was just, it was a big moment for me. So I want young people to have those moments a lot sooner than I do.
Thank you. Is this working now?
Sounds like it.
Okay, great. I just forgot to mention that Polly Friedman is our teen librarian at the Ashland Public Library, and she is taking care of the tech. But we did get some comments on Facebook and Zoom that I wanted to mention. Eduardo says, "Proud of you, my little one. Love you," for D. And Michelle says, "What an incredible and courageous young person. Thank you for sharing your story, D." So obviously you're making an impact even now as you do this program with us. So thank you. So if you all have questions, I'm happy to bring the mic around. Otherwise, we can just keep talking for a few minutes.
Well, this is a question as much as a comment, but growing up, I had the opportunity to live in different parts of the country. And we lived in San Diego for a year or so, and there would be a number of high school, we had a number of class in Mexico. And I also lived in East Orange, New Jersey, in maybe 6th or 7th grade, and that school was black. And I also lived in Baltimore, freshman year in high school. And that school was probably 50% black, 50% white. You know, that was segregated by sex. You know, I make your class well guys, other class. And I think for me to meet, I was a graduate when I moved to the Army. This is like a time in Germany. I don't think it's of the same kind of original makeup. 45% black, 45% white, 10% Hispanic, Asians. I knew what to expect. But I school with them, and I think it would really help me. Stuff about old brothers, but my household up with my parents. My sister and I, there was never any talk about you have to respect everybody.
Mm.
Just kind of boost it, but you have to try. You know, it's not so simple. My parents just, you know, expected to do it.
Well, thank you for that. I love what you shared just about living in different parts of the country and the world and being exposed to different cultures and backgrounds, and how that kind of built up your familiarity and your curiosity about different cultures and races. And I just think that you're hitting a key point, which is exposure, right? If we can't have exposure to people from different backgrounds than our own in real life, then books are a great extension, a great next step. Yeah, thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Yes. Yes, thank you for asking that. I'll repeat the question. In the book, Liliana is, so you're an artist, that's exciting. In the book, Liliana is really fascinated with making miniatures out of cardboard. And so, true story, that was not originally in the first draft. I had her writing in her journal all the time. And my editor, Caitlin DeLuey at Simon & Schuster, who was amazing, she said, Liliana needs a hobby. She needs to do something besides writing and making cup of noodles. And I thought, well, what else is there, right? And so I thought, okay, let me brainstorm. And I just couldn't think of anything. And then one day on a Saturday, I went to the Children's Museum with my son, who's now 8, but at the time I think he was 4. And this is where it's like the universe plops something down in your lap. And you're like, thank you. Because there was an exhibit on making miniature cardboards. Ana Sedano had an exhibit there where you could see the paper cardboard houses, nail shops, little bodegas, like that she made out of cardboard, old, magazine cutouts, construction paper, just anything. And they were gorgeous and they were small. They were like these little miniature houses and stores. And I thought, boom, that's what Liliana is going to be interested in making. And then it just fit into the themes of the book too, because place is so prevalent in the novel, and it's something that she can do on her own. And at the end of the book, she gives her mother a little miniature, remember? And it's just like a sweet moment. So, but I would love to see people make those. Like we could totally do something like, oh, let's do something. Right? All right, yeah.
So we have another comment here. Thank you for sharing your story this evening. It is necessary to have more conversations to eliminate assumptions about race, which is completely true. I, as a librarian, think it's amazing to hear about what sparks the story for you, like the houses, and, where did that come from? So thank you for sharing that. Do you guys have any other questions or thoughts or comments that you'd like to bring up?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So first of all, I'm so happy I came because I wasn't sure the rain was going to be my wedding. I had actually, I'm a former teacher of 15 years and then administrator for 5 years, most recently a principal. And I bring that up simply because I wish more of my colleagues could have been here tonight. I was doing a recruitment effort and things got in the way. But ironically, the story here, I was very attracted. I have not read either one of your books, and I intend to. I'm very interested in how to reach out in a more inclusive way with my students. I do a lot of tutoring. Most of my students, for whatever reason, are Asian, and English is not spoken as their primary language. And I find myself bringing a lot of literature into our lessons that are from many different cultures. And I know sometimes I'm pushing the envelope a little bit in the sense that they have been instructed by their parents to do well on SATs. I find myself grappling with sometimes for confessions, like I want to make it more than just memorizing vocabulary words or, you know, diagramming out diagrams and studies, but learning how to subject verb and stuff. So I share that just simply because I know I'm being true to myself that I can bring to our conversations things that are hard for them to talk about because their parents have certain expectations of them that are fine, except that they have such hearts and things they need to get off their chest that I just sometimes let the stories come out and say, hallelujah, you've got some great ideas, just keep going, don't be beholden to the testing. The other part that I just want to share that's sort of from my heart is when asking where I'm from, interesting, I feel like I stepped into a landmine because I was interviewing teachers last year for my remote, I was the head of remote learning academy. And the woman on the, when I was interviewing had a beautiful, lovely accent, just gorgeous. I was so intrigued. And I just said to her, well, I said, where are you from? And she goes, well, where are you from? And I was sort of taken aback because, as you said, depending upon the context, I mean, I really wanted to know where she's from. Like, it was beautiful. I want to talk like her, I won't say her name, well, maybe Chantel, you would know, but I thought it was the most gorgeous name too. And I found myself, and then I met her, we got together in person with masks. She's a different skin color than I am. I don't talk French, I talk lots of French. And I can speak Spanish. I'm from California. My name is Raina Esperanza, whatever. I felt so excited to meet her, and she and I bonded. But I found myself I needed to say to her, "I need to talk to you." This was like 4 weeks later, and I said, "I want to talk to you about that question I asked you because I just made a decision. I'm not going to be embarrassed by something that I didn't. It wasn't intentional to offend." And I talked to my principal friend who was supposed to be here tonight. She goes, "Oh, you should never have it in an interview. You should never, ever ask where you're from." And this is what my friend said, who had many more years in administration. I said, "Really? I just like, where are you from? Where are you from?" So I said to her, "I just want you to know that I really wanted to know you and get to know you in a way that was like just authentic." And so she said to me, I wasn't offended, but I wanted we cleared the air.
Yeah.
So I guess my message and thank you for that title. Thank you for saying, please ask me where I'm from, because I kind of been carrying this little heavy heart around. And she and I are fine and we're friends and all that. But it's a hard conversation. Like, how do you just be natural and not offend people? I'm learning so much, but thank you ever so much for bringing this conversation into this forum. And I'm going to read your books because I'm excited.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I feel like that's a beautiful note to close out the evening, which is like the power of words. And, I think that, again, it's not a bad question to ask someone where they're from. It has a connotation, it has a loaded meaning. And I think for many people of color who have been on the receiving end of that question for so long, you can't hear it in a new way. You hear it how you hear it. And that does make me think about the difference between intent and impact, right? And your intent was great. You wanted to get to know her more, but maybe the impact landed a little rough. But you still use conversation and the power of words to sort of untangle that moment, and that's everything. I mean, imagine if we all just did that more and more. We wouldn't have such hatred, and I will always advocate for the power of words and the power of story. Language creates meaning, and words create worlds. And I'm so honored to be able to do that and to be a part of this evening. Thank you all so much. Ladies, thanks.
As always,
Congratulations, Jennifer. And I forgot her name, sorry. T. I congratulate you. You are wonderful. It reminds me when Jennifer was in age. You're gonna be a good writer if you go into writing.
Full circle. Thank you all for coming, for braving the rain and for being here on a Tuesday night. Like I said, this is the first in-person event that I've done since pre-COVID. So I feel like I want to like give you all like a hug. I don't think I can, but you know what I mean. A hug and air hug. Thank you all so much.
All through Jennifer, Mary, Dee, this has been really amazing. I know I've learned a lot. We do have a book sale going on, so Paul from Silver Unicorn Books is here selling both of Jennifer's books, and you are welcome to buy them from him and then come back up here and have her sign them. For our friends on Zoom and on Facebook, this sort of ends our virtual part of the evening, but you can still buy books from Silver Unicorn Books, and I believe Jennifer is going to sign those as well. So thank you all for being here online, and thank you all for being here in person. Oh my gosh, that was awesome. Wow, I forgot the exciting. No, but they. So good. Would you guys, the paparazzi is circling. Can we take some pictures? Yeah. Oh, this here? Yeah. Thank you. You take care. Talking to you. Thank you.
And the mouse. All right. I switched cameras for everyone on the live stream. Hopefully this is a little bit clearer for the ending.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Oh.
Amy, do you guys want to? Yeah, Amy. Yeah, do you want to come up?
Okay, do that. 1, 2, 3, we go.
Be careful stepping back.
I know.
Yeah. All right.